Reservationless.
Today's webinar, How Do You Ruin Everything by Being You, is presented by John Stoker. John is the founder and president of Lightstorming Consulting and Dialogue Works. In these roles, John has worked extensively with a number of companies, helping them increase their capacity to enhance effectiveness and improve results. John has experience in designing strategic change and in creating and implementing training curriculum in support of company-wide improvement initiatives. John has also been a practicing criminal defense lawyer. He received BA degrees in English and French, an MA in organizational behavior, and a law degree from Brigham Young University. Thank you for presenting for us today, John. You can go ahead and get started.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Interesting title, is it not? Ask yourself this. How many of you have offended somebody without even intending to? If I was in a class, I'd look for a show of hands, and my guess is that every hand would go up. That all of us have said or done something at some point in time that's offended somebody, even though we didn't intend to do so. Let's kind of begin with an application example as I tell you the story of a woman whose name was Summer. Summer had worked for a company for about 20-plus years, and when she started, she was the admin to the CEO. And because the office was small, she had managed all the activities in his office. When Summer began, there was only 7 people in the office. Recently, Tanya was hired to be the Senior VP of Human Resources. The CEO had asked her to take over the management of the office. He told her to organize a team, delegate functions, and then to oversee those functions. Although Tanya agreed, she told the CEO, you know that eventually Summer is going to probably become pretty upset. The CEO agreed and said that he would handle it. One day, Tanya realized that there was only 2 people that had access to the CEO's office and confidential strategic files, himself and Summer. She kind of felt like it would be important to have kind of a backup plan in case anything ever happened. So she mentioned it to the CEO, who gave her permission to make a couple of keys, one that she would keep herself, without telling Summer. Then all of a sudden, one day, the CEO called Tanya and asked her to retrieve a document from his file and fax it to him at his home. He was working remotely that day. So Tanya agreed. She went into his office, got the document that he needed out of the confidential file, and as she was closing the file, Summer walked in. What are you doing? She yelled, retrieving a document for the CEO. Well, who gave you a key? She asked. Well, it's the CEO. That's just BS. Tanya said, could we just calm down a little bit and we'll talk about it for a moment? I will not. That's just the way I am. And she stormed out of the office. Tanya locked the door and left the office, and things started to get a little heated, even more so out on the floor. Who do you think you are coming in here? You know, you are so manipulative, controlling, power-hungry. You know, I was just doing as I was asked. That's BS. Could we step into my office to talk so we're not doing it out here? No, I'll talk about what I want, where I want, Tanya said. But Tanya realized the conversation was going nowhere, and so she asked if they could talk again, and Summer said no, so she decided to let it go. Monday came, and she approached Summer and said, can we talk? No, I'm not ready. Tuesday, same thing. No, I'm not ready. Finally, Wednesday, she went to her and said, can we talk now? Yeah, I guess. And I just want to begin by knowing why you became so angry at me last Friday. This is all so BS, Summer responded. Like I said, you're cold, manipulating, power-hungry, and you're edgy. What do you mean by that? Just that. Can you give me an example? I just did. Well, can you tell me what, you know, you are edgy. You're being edgy now, and that's just the way I am. Live with it. I don't care if people think I'm blunt, direct, and honest. That's just the way I am. True story. So the question then becomes, why did Summer act this way? What we're going to do is talk today about the fact that we all have different styles that either help us to connect with others or not. So I want to talk about those styles. I want to talk about increasing your awareness of your primary and secondary style. And then we'll talk towards the end about learning to adapt or match your style to those of others. Now, you might want to ask, why would it be important to recognize, style differences? Bottom line, we came up with an effectiveness model that looks a little bit like this. I have a book coming out in the fall, and my editor said, I noticed in this introduction you've written about results. Everybody writes about conversation from the perspective of improving results. Are there other R's? And I go, certainly there are. And she said, well, like what? And I said, well, there's results, relationship, and respect. And she said, well, what do you mean? I said, if we're respectful to others, does that improve results? And she said, yeah, I guess so. And I go, how about relationship? And I'm not saying you have to love somebody, but if you have the semblance of a respectful relationship, does that relationship, in fact, improve respect and results? And she said, yeah. So notice, when we talk results, we're really saying that results is impacted by the respect between us and others and our relationships. Now, in essence, every conversation that we hold is indicative of the results, respect, and relationship that we have. So, for example, you could say that the conversations you hold are the respect that you're getting in your, I guess, results or relationship. Or your relationships, if they're not what they should be, it's basically based on the conversation that you're holding. Or if you're not getting optimal results, the conversation that you're holding is what influences those results. And of course, you are at the center or at the core of every conversation that you hold. Bottom line, increasing your effectiveness increases your overall capacity to achieve results, improve respect, and build relationships. Now, here's what's tremendously interesting. Years ago, when I first started studying and kind of trying to become a conversational expert, I went to the big dictionary in the law library and looked up the word conversation. And these definitions that I've listed here are the first three definitions in the volume. That conversation is the act of living, associating, and dealing with others. It also, second definition, is the manner of conduct or behavior that you display or deliver between you and another person. It wasn't until the third definition, the oral exchange of ideas, opinions, and observations, that we actually got to an element that literally deals with talking. So note, conversation then is not only what we say, but it also has to do with everything that we do, has to do with our behavior. So even though we may not say something with our voice, we're saying something with the rest of us, our tone, our nonverbals, our body, our pauses, our innuendo, and tone, all that communicates something. Now, I want to show you what we call our real conversation model. And we're not talking about real conversations today. But I want you to know that there are 4 behaviors that if you want to be a great communicator, you have to be good at. You'll see them there. They're recognize and suspend, express, ask, listen, and attend. So recognizing and suspending has to do with our thinking, being open. Expressing is how we share our thoughts, ideas, and feelings. Asking is about asking questions. Listening is what we do with our ears, and attending is what we do with the rest of us. As we combine these 4 behaviors, we literally come up with what we call fields that exist in any conversation. Initiate, discover, connect, and build. The reason I wanted you to see these is because in reality, I just converted the different styles from kind of nouns into descriptors of individual style. And so that's what we'll be talking about. The phases in holding any difficult conversation become descriptions of different styles that people possess. Initiator, discoverer, connector, and builder. And you'll notice I put two axes up, forcefulness and expressiveness, which we'll talk about. And on those axes, we have some other labels, aggressive and passive, open and restrained. So notice that there are 4 specific styles that people use, which we'll be talking about. What's also interesting is that those styles are communicated vocally, visually, and verbally. Notice I skipped mentally, because mentally, the way people think drives the other 3. But these are the 4 channels of communication. We visually, vocally, verbally, and mentally communicate. Right? For example, having been a criminal defense attorney, people often ask me, do you ever know how to tell when somebody is lying? Well, I do, and there's a number of different factors. But when I was a lawyer years ago, we used to use, in a lie detector test, a little machine called the voice stress analyzer. Have you ever heard of one of those? I assume you have. What it does is manages and measures the stress in a person's voice when they are asked questions. So if the stress analyzer shows a high level of stress, they basically say, you know, you're lying. In fact, I've had some people say, where can I get one of those? I go, what do you mean? Well, sometimes my spouse calls up and says, honey, I've got to work late tonight. Hope that's okay. Man, I'd like to hook that thing into the phone and see what the stress level was so I'd know whether they're lying or not. The important point about a stress analyzer is that when we look at what people do as they communicate, or as we observe the different things that they do and say, you want to notice clusters. There's different things that people do with their voice, with the tone of their voice, with their nonverbal behavior. All of that communicates something. So you can't just take one element of a way that people communicate and say, oh, they're this. You have to look for clusters. And we'll give you some of those clusters as we kind of move along. Now, why does all this matter? Bottom line, the brain is hardwired to connect with others. And our brain is making snap judgments of people that we're in interaction with. All the research kind of goes from the span of 1/10 to 15 seconds. Very, very interesting. And the first thing that the brain will assess is your trustworthiness. And the second is attractiveness. Kind of flunked that one. But notice that the brain doesn't take very long to do this. In fact, what's kind of fun is if you just watch 2 people kind of talking in a restaurant or observe people at the mall and watch them, you'll notice that the one seems to almost reflect the other. Why is that? Because these little mirroring neurons that are in people's brains are reaching out and are trying to connect with the mirroring neurons of another person. The connection is reflected in the way people act towards each other. So you'll notice the third arrow there says what? People reflect their style to you. So what people are doing as they talk and interact is reflecting their style. People also reflect your reflection back to you. For example, think of it this way. If you're to get angry with somebody, what do they typically do? They'll reflect usually, unless they're highly emotionally intelligent and can remain calm. But when they're confronted with reaction, anger or frustration, most people will reflect that back to the person because that's what was reflecting to them. So notice the check mark. It says recognizing or reflecting back others' reflection increases engagement and understanding. Now sometimes when I point this out, people will say, well, gosh, it really sounds like you're talking about manipulation. No. subconsciously, our brains are trying to connect with each other. And the way that they do is by reflecting to each other the style that they have. So if it's doing that subconsciously, why not, don't we just do it consciously and deliberately? If you can recognize a person's style and then reflect that style back to them, even though it may not be your own style, then why not do it? Doing it basically creates engagement and connection and increases understanding because people feel comfortable in your presence. I hope that makes sense. So what we want to do now is talk about the different styles that people display and get clear on them, and we'll do this from the perspective of mental, vocal, visual, and even verbal kind of cues or clusters that will help you to understand these folks. Now, there was a handout that I gave to Jessica, and she said she posted it on the website. So if you haven't gotten it, I would go get it, because one of the things that there is in the handout, aside from a description of these different types of styles, is a little self-assessment that you can take on yourself and kind of get a read on what your style is. Let me just say that everybody has a primary style and a secondary style. The primary style, they believe, is what we're born with, and the secondary style is a style that we've learned to use as we adapt to talking to other people. They say that only 5% of the population use 3 styles naturally. But as I said before, what I want to do is teach you about these styles so you can recognize them, and then you can, in turn, what we call style match. You can shift your style to match someone else to create that connection. So let's begin by talking about initiators. Initiators want to get to it. So bottom line, they want results and action. And usually they want it yesterday. They're often notice that's the mental aspect. They're forceful and direct, and they often speak quickly and emphatically. That's the vocal cue. Sometimes these folks are accused of being blunt and cold. What do they do visually? They make direct eye contact, and they have no space limitation. And they often use gestures to make a point. Let me talk about a few of those. I'm an initiator myself, and so I can talk to you and give you direct eye contact and never look away. I have to watch my spacing because I can get right up in your face. In fact, often when I do this presentation in front of a live audience, I'll pick somebody out of the audience who is an initiator and have them come and stand next to me in front of the audience anywhere they want. And it's not uncommon that they'll literally almost put their hip right on my hip. And I make gestures to make a point. I either point or I'll make a chopping motion in front of me to emphasize a point that I'm trying to make. Initiators, by the way, are frustrated by connectors and discoverers. And we'll talk about that when we get a little farther along. So recently, I was having a meeting with my SEO guy, and as we came down the stairs, my spouse just so happened to be in the reception area, and I said to this gentleman, "Brian, thanks, bill me." And I turned and left. Later that night at home, my spouse said to me, "Does anybody like to work with you?" I go, "Why? Why do you say that?" She says, "You're just so cold." And that's just me being an initiator and her being something else. So here's the language that you typically will hear from an initiator. "I need this ASAP. Just do it." Well, is it yes or no? Completed. Don't waste my time. The bottom line is we need results. Get it done. What's the purpose of this? What action will you take? Win. We got to win at all costs. So those are the kind of words or phrases you would hear, the verbal cues you would hear from an initiator. So let me give an initiator example. If you were being fired or terminated by an initiator, He might say this: "Come into my office, please. Don't sit down. Your number's up." Just that quick. That's how he would do it. That's the initiator. Let's talk about the builder. Builders like appreciation. They like to be appreciated for what they do. They want recognition and appreciation. Typically, it's because of their ideas. They're often very fun-loving and spontaneous, and they speak expressively and continuously. Now, why continuously? The reason that people who are builders speak continuously is because they're kind of thinking out loud. They're kind of assembling the pieces of the puzzle verbally as they talk to you. And so sometimes you may find yourself in your head saying, "Where is this going?" Or "What is the point here?" And the reason that you're confused is because they're assembling or thinking out loud. They're often sometimes very, very frustrating to deal with because that's the way they kind of talk. And it's like endless. Now, in terms of visual cues, they can make direct, sustained eye contact, but it's often intermittent. They will touch you sometimes, even though the law says no touchy. They may touch you when talking. They may touch your forearm, your elbow, the back of your upper arm, or even your shoulder. And they often will use their entire body to speak, particularly their hands, and their face will be very animated. In fact, they probably couldn't talk without using their hands. They're usually frustrated by initiators and discoverers. And if we're looking at, if you will, verbal cues that they might use, you might hear words like this: "Sweet! Oh, that's a fabulous idea. I'm feeling like, we need to cover our bases. Don't sweat the details. Just dazzle them and baffle them. Hey, give me the big picture. Man, this is big time overrated." So they often talk in terms of metaphor or analogy, or they want to tell a story to illustrate their point. That's the builders. So how would a builder fire someone? They might have you come into their office and say something like this: "Good news, you're going to have the opportunity to use your skills to help another company and make new friends. Unfortunately, we just have to let you go," like anybody was holding you back to begin with. That's the way a builder typically would talk. Let's talk connectors. Connectors want to get cooperation. They want everybody to get along. In fact, you'll notice it says there at the top of the slide, they want peace and harmony. Consequently, they love to work in teams, and so they want everyone to get along and to be included. They're warm but reserved in the way they speak, and they often speak quietly and can be very soft-spoken. They make little, if any, eye contact. In fact, if an initiator is talking to a connector, the connector may not look at them at all. They may look all around them or even at the floor, which is really frustrating to initiators because initiators think that a person is only looking at them if they give eye contact. They like their space. In fact, that exercise I mentioned earlier, I pick out usually an initiator in an audience and a connector. Well, last time I did it, I picked out a connector, and where did they sit? On the last row. And I asked this person to come up and stand next to me wherever they wanted, and she literally crawled into the table. Of course, everybody rolled, but that was the point. She did not want to be up in front of the group. And when I talk about liking their space, it's at least 2 arms length, unless you know them. They just don't like being very close to people. They do use casual gestures. That's kind of the connector. They're precise. They're great folks. They like to get everything right. And like I said, they like peace and harmony. So if we looked at the kind of language or verbal cues that a connector would use, here's some of the things that you might hear. Well, could you explain that to me again, please? Now, I'd like to hear your ideas first, and then I'll respond. Now, let's not be in a hurry. We need to consider others' feelings. I'd like to hear everyone's ideas. What do you think? What does everyone else think? We always do it like this. Team. Think of the team. So the reason that they talk in that kind of term is because they really value the relationships with people. They don't want anyone to be offended, and they want everyone to be included. So they also are perfectionists. They don't usually like change. They love the status quo because that way they know that they'll be able to do what you expect them to do. So they're often very nervous with that. If we were talking about how, I guess, a connector would fire someone, they probably would say something, like this. Come into my office. How are things going? Do you like it here? How do you think the work has been going? Really? Oh, why did I ask? Oh, nothing. They would have a very difficult time firing someone. Let me give an example of a connector. Years ago, I was in a meeting, and I got a buzz on my cell phone, and it was somebody from another company, an executive who so happened to be a connector, who texted me and said, I need you to call me immediately. So I thought it was pretty important, so I left the room, and I called him, and I just said, what's up? And he said, well, how you doing? How's your family? How are the kids? Did you have a good Christmas? Oh, that's great. That's great. And I finally just said, Nick, I was in a meeting. What do you need? See, that's my initiator. And he said, John, come on. I asked about your family. You ought to ask me about mine. So I did. How's the fam? How's the spouse? How's the kids? How's your daughter who's in law school? How's your son? And then we got down to business. Now, I did a lot of business with this organization, so I learned right off the bat that if he was a connector, I better try to establish a personal connection first before I got to what the business was. Okay? Let's talk about discoverers for a minute. Discoverers want to get it right. These people are highly, highly analytical. They want precision, and they want to demonstrate their expertise. They speak deliberately, and they ask a lot of questions. In fact, somebody who's really a pure discoverer, they may frustrate you with all the questions they ask. And it's like they won't answer until they get answers to their questions. Why? Because they want to get it right. They want to be right. What's interesting about these people in terms of visual cues, they often will look away from you when they think. So if you know somebody that's a discoverer, and you said to them, if I had the opportunity to ask one of you to figure out if you were a discoverer, I'd look right at you and I'd say, tell me 3 things that you like about this presentation. What they do is look to the side. And what they're doing is thinking. They can't make eye contact when they think. It's almost like they're pulling out a little file drawer and they're looking for the file that says, course I've taken. Oh, I'm in this ruin thing. What are some things I might like? So they take a long time to answer as they think things through. They like their personal space, not as bad as connectors. So let's just say an arm's length, whereas with connectors it may be 2 or 3. And they use no gestures. Their arms often just are placed to the side of their bodies, and they don't use their hands at all. And as I said, they speak deliberately. That's a nice way of saying they often speak in a monotone, and they're not inflecting their voice very much. And they just would say, well, tell me why you want to know that. That's the kind of thing that you would hear from a discoverer. They're very much frustrated by builders. So what kind of language, then, would a discoverer use? This is the kind of stuff you might hear from them. What's the problem? Whose idea was this? Just give me the data. What do you want to do? Tell me what's the plan. You have a plan? What is the plan? Well, that will never work. What happened? Why? Well, you know what? I need more information. So if we were talking about how would a discoverer fire you, notice fire is probably an initiator word, but here's what they'd do. They'd call you in and say, please sit down. They'd say, notice in front of me there are 3 pieces of paper. If you'll turn over the first page, you'll notice those were your goals for the last 6 months. Now turn over the second page. On the second page, there are the percentages of the goals that you actually achieved, particularly if you look at the last quarter. You can see that you fell short by more than 50% on each goal. Please turn over the third page. The third page represents the lost revenue and the standard deviation of what you cost the company by not meeting your particular goal. Consequently, you get what they're doing. So they're going to lay all the facts, all the data on you, give you all the reason and the rationale before they tell you that you're out of there. That's discoverers. Very analytical, asking a lot of questions. I hope those illustrations help. Let me give you another one. Let's do all 4 just for fun. Let's say I got lost in your town and I was looking for directions. If I was talking to an initiator and I said, well, how would I get to this location? They would say, go down 2 blocks, turn right, go 1 block, turn left, it's on your right. That's the initiator. If I was talking to the builder would say something like, oh, where are you from? They probably would touch me on the arm. Oh, how nice. And tell me why you were here again. This is really a lovely city. I think that you'll enjoy people here. They're very, very friendly. And there's just a lot of good things to see and do. That would be the builder. If I was talking to a connector, they would say, if I said, how do I get to this location? They'd say, there's a gas station on the corner. Go down there and ask them. Why? They don't want to be wrong. They don't want to take responsibility. If I was talking to a discoverer, the discoverer might say, well, you want to go the short way or the long way? You need to get gas or do you have enough? Are you in a hurry? There is a scenic route. Tell me, are you good at following directions? So notice before they told you anything, they'd ask you a ton of questions. Now, I said earlier that these styles have difficulty with one another. So let me talk about them for just a second so you can see how they kind of frustrate each other. If I was doing this session live with everyone, I might ask you if you're in a relationship with somebody who's different from you. And most people will say, well, sure I am. In fact, by the way, they say 87% of people marry opposites the first time out. So let me explain the opposites, and then I'll make a relationship application. You'll notice that the builders and discoverers have trouble. Why? Because builders have lots of big ideas, big vision, and no facts. So the discoverer is frustrated because they're thinking of the builder as being all fluff. They just say, give me the facts, give me the reason for what you're wanting to do and why, and that. So they frustrate one another. The connectors bug the initiators because they talk slow and they want to make a connection first, a personal connection. They want to have reasons for everything and be assured. The discoverer also bugs the initiator because they want to ask all kinds of questions. Why? Because they want to have all the data before they make a recommendation about a decision. So the discoverers are kind of into analysis, and the initiators are frustrated because they just want somebody to do something yesterday. So the initiators also kind of offend the connectors because they're so direct, blunt, and quick, whereas the connectors are more slow and deliberate. But the connectors are often accusing the initiators of being rude or disrespectful or just too direct and blunt. So we got it. Discoverers want data. They frustrate builders because their builders have big ideas and want to share their big ideas, and discoverers don't want to hear it. Connectors are frustrated by initiators because of their bluntness, directness, and often coldness. And initiators are frustrated by connectors because they're so slow and deliberate and have to be reassured about everything along the way. So I said if you're in a relationship with someone else, I know with my spouse that oftentimes where we kind of clash in our relationship has to do with the way we think of time. We have arguments about time. So if I say I'll be home around 6 o'clock and I'm an initiator, right, when will I be home? Probably 5:59. If she says she'll be home around 6 o'clock and she's an initiator, well, when will she be home? She can be home at 7 or 8. It's still around 6, but it's way around. And so notice the distinctions or styles that we have even cause us to interpret commitments that we have in a very, very different way. So how do you recognize who is what? On the handout that I provided on your website, you can download these. But notice that we call this the Expressiveness Axis. And there's a number of different components to this. The easiest one to remember is the one by orientation. People who are connectors and builders are very oriented toward people, whereas initiators and discoverers want to focus solely on tasks. Now, there's some other ones there. Notice the tone of connectors and builders is varied, where it's more deliberate and monotone with the initiators and discoverers. But the easiest way is kind of to remember that. For example, let's say that I was to kind of come up with what would be a good example? With a Walmart example. Let's say I'm standing in line in Walmart, and the line is quite long, and I'm a little on the frustrated side because of the fact that it's taking a long time. And here's what I might say. You ask yourself, what am I? Wow, here we are in line. How long have you been here? Look, it just took 10 minutes for them to basically check that one person out. And there's 5 other people in front of us. And wow, at that rate, it might take me 50 minutes, to get to the head of the line. Wow, how long have you been waiting? So notice, if that was what I heard from somebody that had just come up and pulled up behind me, I heard them talk about task, how long they've been in line, how long it took for somebody to be checked out, how long it would be to be there in totality. That would tell me that person was probably either an initiator or a discoverer. Okay? So here's the question you ask yourself. As you're talking with a person, is this person more open or more restrained in what they're talking about? And so the reason that I put that is I just want you to think, if you made it really simple, are they talking to me about task or are they talking to me about people? That kind of a conversation was about task, if that makes sense. All right, let's talk about forcefulness then. This is the forcefulness axis. This basically deals with how aggressive or passive the person is in their delivery. So an easy way to think about it is just in terms of delivery. So notice the aggressive folks. They do more telling than asking when it comes to dialogue. They speak more quickly or fast, where the others are slow in tempo. They're more loud in terms of the volume, where the others are more quiet. They're more emphatic with hand gestures, whereas diminished or almost non-existent if you're a connector or discoverer. They have a tendency to lean towards you, whereas the others will lean away from you. Their eye contact, initiator and builder eye contact, is more direct, and the eye contact, remember, of connectors and discoverers is more indirect. For example, discoverers will look to the side a lot, and connectors will look all around, maybe take a glimpse at you, but they won't make eye contact very often. The top folks, builders, initiators, get close to you often and touch you in terms of proximity, where the others are more far removed. And the folks at the top will talk more, and the folks at the bottom will talk less. Notice that all goes to delivery. So if I was using, let's use another Walmart example of forcefulness. So some guy pulls up behind you in line and automatically just waves their arms and says, "You've got to be kidding. Are you kidding us? This is taking too long. I mean, what is the deal? I've got other places to go. Please, 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 please. You three over there in the blue vest, quit your yakking and man a register. Man, we don't have all day." So notice in the tone of their voice, what they do with their gestures, the fact that they're loud, they're speaking quickly, that tells you that person's either a builder or an initiator. So the question, oops, did we miss one? We did. There's a slide that's missing, so let me just tell you, and I don't know how that happened. But you ask yourself, is this person more aggressive or more passive in how they communicate? So if they're aggressive, you know they're builder and initiator. If they're passive, you know they're either a connector or discoverer. So in this one, you would just notice how they deliver their message. So if we went back to Summer, what do you think she was? I've been here 20 years. What are you doing in the office? And the like. Tell me what it is. Was she aggressive or passive? And obviously, she was aggressive, wasn't she? Kept yelling, "That's just the way I am. I'm outside of the office." So we know that if she's aggressive, she's either builder or initiator. Did she talk about people or did she talk about task? She talked about task. I've been here 20 years. Who gave you the key? This is just so much BS. So we know that she's an initiator. This is just the way I am. In fact, I even think she said, "I've been accused of being direct, blunt, and cold. That's just the way I am. You need to live with it." So aggressive and task-oriented makes her an initiator. All right, so how do we connect with folks? We want to match, not mimic. Now, when we talk about matching, we're not talking about parroting or mimicking them. We're talking about matching. So if I'm in a proximity to somebody and I take a step, I'm standing, and I take a step towards them, and they quickly look down or look away or take a big breath, or maybe even they take a step back, that tells me I'm too close. Watch how people look at you with their eyes. If somebody is looking at me directly, then I can directly look at them all day long. If they look and then look away, then I look and look away. I just match what they're doing with their eye contact. If they'll use a gesture with their hand, then I'll try to use a gesture with my hand. If they're speaking deliberately or slowly, then I'll slow down my cadence because I have to as an initiator. And then tone, whatever kind of tone they portray, I'll just try to gently reflect or use the same tone that they use back to them. I hope that makes sense, but that's what we're doing. Again, not mimicking, but noticing. Now, I'll tell you, here's what's fun. If you just start noticing people as they talk to each other, and you're just observing a pair of people in the lunchroom or at the mall or when you're out to dinner, you'll notice that they naturally, not even knowing any of this, will match each other. Their body styles will be in the same position. You may have two people leaning in, two people more relaxed. Watch the gestures. People do that naturally without even knowing that they're doing it. Why? Because they're just trying to match each other subconsciously. All we're saying is you want to do it deliberately. So here are some quick tips, and they're in the handout that I provided on the website. If you have a boss or somebody that's an initiator, you really want to connect with them. You want to be precise and concise. Concise is short. Precise is to the point, right? You want to talk about the task at hand, not people issue. Be prepared to offer solutions. Come with solutions. And be prepared, know the details. Don't share them unless you're asked to share them. Those are some quick tips for initiators. If you were talking to a builder, you want to be friendly, show interest in their ideas, ask questions to check your understanding. Remember I talked about the fact that they talk out loud and you might go, where in heaven's name is this going? Then you want to ask questions to check your understanding. So are you saying that? Are you asking me to? Could you give it to me in a bullet point? You want this and this, is that right? Because if not, sometimes builders themselves don't even understand what they're saying. And so by you asking them questions, it forces them to focus up their thinking. You might want to explore the big picture first and then look for details or ask questions that surface details. And trust me, most of the time builders have not thought about details. What about connectors? Make a personal connection. Ask them how they're doing. Show an interest. Answer any questions they have, and they'll have some. And those questions will deal with change or what it is that you're wanting them to do. They want to get it right. Draw out their perspective with questions. These are the type of people who sit in meetings and don't say anything for 3 hours. But here's the thing. These people, and it's not in the slide, they know more about seeing how things fit together than the other three styles. So I've sat next to connectors in meetings, and before the meeting will start, they'll say, you know, in terms of this process, we should do A, B, and then D, and then C. Then they won't say anything for 2 hours in the meeting, and the team will finally come up with A, B, D, and then C, and they'll lean over and say, told you. So you want to draw these people out by asking them to share their ideas and their perspective and explain any reason for a change. They want to know why they're changing, or there's a change in a process or procedure, and then what to do about it. Discoverers, you want to be prepared with facts and data. That's what convinces them that there should be a change or something to be done. You need to be thorough, and you need to be accurate, and you need to be well organized and logical, and you need to allow them time to think. Remember how they look to the side? Sometimes they'll be quiet for 30 seconds to a minute, and you'll be thinking, what in crud's name is going on? Don't be derailed by that. It's just that they're taking time to think, so allow them time to think. Now, I don't want you to think that any one of these styles are bad. They're not. In fact, quite frankly, all four styles help in working with others and teams to achieve maximum results. I mean, look what each one brings to the party. Initiators push for action and results. Builders want to explore ideas, and they're very good at motivating the troops. Connectors are concerned with execution and involving everyone. And discoverers want to do an analysis, and they want precision. I wish I had a better financial discoverer on my team. I don't, and so I always wonder, what questions should I be asking that I'm not? So all of these bring something to the party. You just got to recognize what people's styles are, and then basically be prepared to connect with them by understanding what their style is, and then being able to match it. Well, there it is again, very quickly. Notice initiators want to get it done, discoverers want to get it right, connectors want to get cooperation, builders want appreciation and recognition. Open and restrained in terms of expressiveness is about what people talk about. Remember that. Make it easy. Is it people-oriented or is it task-oriented? And aggressive versus passive is about tell versus ask. That's forcefulness. That's how they do the delivery. That's what's kind of going on. So those are the 4 styles. Let me just tell you a little bit about me for a second. Jessica said I could, and then we'll take any questions you may have. We help people kind of get moving in the right direction, and we'd invite you to go to our site, dialogueworks.com. There's a bunch of stuff up there you might be interested in. There's articles. There's a blog which turns into a monthly newsletter. There's media. In fact, I just recorded this webinar yesterday, and we'll be putting it up sometime in the next month. There's a listing of events. One of the most interesting things on our site is a library of what we call conversational recipes. There's actually 11 recipes up there that teach you how to hold tough conversations. The first 3 you can watch without doing anything. The next 8, we ask you to create a login so that you can access those on the site, but they're still free. Just give your information. And there's other things on the site that require a login as well, and then we do one-on-one mentoring. Contact us at that website or the number that's there if you're interested. Bottom line, we try to get people talking about what matters most. This style piece that we've talked about today deals with a chapter in my book, which is actually called How Do You Ruin Everything by Being You, which we'll be out in the fall. Anyway, that's me there. Still look like that. Thanks, Evan. But I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you all today. I hope you learned something. Jessica, did you want to turn it over to some questions, or what would you like to do?
Sure, we can open it up for questions. Again, you can ask questions one of 2 ways. You can either type your question into the Q&A box, or you can ask your question verbally by hitting *6, and that will unmute your phone line. So let's open it up for questions.
Question.
Sure, go ahead.
The handout was slightly different from the presentation that was presented. Is there any way we can get a copy of the presentation that was shown on all our screens?
Yeah, I'll send it to you, Jessica, if you want. You want the slides, in other words.
Exactly, yeah. Because they had a little more information and bullet points and stuff, which I'd like to be able to review.
Okay. I'll be happy to send Jessica that after we're done.
Thank
and
you very much.
Jessica, you want, whatever you do, if you want to put them up, can do that. And
I usually send out a follow-up email with the survey link and everything, so I'll just attach it to that email to everyone that was here.
Okay.
Any other questions? Sure, go ahead.
In the beginning, you talked about the 4 kinds of ways that we communicate, and it was visual, vocal, and I don't know what the third one was.
Okay, so visual is kind of what you're seeing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, visual is what you're seeing people do with their body and their hands and their gestures. Vocal is kind of the quality, if you will, of their voice. Verbal has to deal with the specific words that they kind of use.
Okay.
And then I said mental. And I said mental drives the other 3. So notice, if I'm an initiator and mentally I want results, I want action, right? So what do I do? What do I do visually, vocally, and verbally? Visually, I'm going to give you direct eye contact. I'm probably going to get a little too close to you. I may use my finger or a slashing motion with my hand to make a point. Vocally, I'm pretty emphatic on things that I want. I often get angry or I'll get emotional, to be honest. If I don't get what I want, and I'll show that vocally, it'll be in the tone of my voice. Verbally, I use things like action, results, get it done, just do it, what's your problem, where I'll make accusation and that, but those are the kind of words that I would use verbally. I'm oriented to action and results. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a comment
which is kind of scary. Like in seeing all these 4 different types, I see that I can be one of each of those with different, depending on the relationship I have with different family members. So it's like
absolutely.
So it's like the dynamics of the relationships that cause me to be a different one of these.
Yep. So here's the thing. If you got the handout ahead of time, you'll notice at the top it says, answer or check these boxes based on how you would like people to communicate with you. My guess is, though, is as you look at that, if you do that, you may have almost all of them, or nearly all of them, checked in 2 areas, but some others in the other areas. And that kind of goes to that. In certain situations, you're going to talk differently. For example, I would talk differently to friends at a football game on a Friday night than I would the same friends at a funeral on Saturday morning. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely, yes.
So the situation may dictate it, but you want to start to get a notion of your style. I will tell you this, I've written an assessment that's actually being processed right now. It'll probably be up on our website, dialogueworks.com, in about 3 weeks. It's really much more in-depth than what I gave you in the handout. To get to it, you'll have to create a login on the website, but you might find that even more and more helpful because it's specifically, I wrote it specifically in paired questions that get at visual, vocal, verbal, mental aspects about the way people approach. But if you can just start noticing what other people are doing and then match their style, you'll be able to connect with them. And then you'll kind of want to explore because there will be some common things that you do based on who you're talking to. Does that make sense? But if you can recognize those in others and then match them, you'll form connections and get better results, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, last call for questions. Okay, John, I am not hearing any other questions, so I would like to thank you for all the excellent information you presented to us today. I would also like to thank all of our members here for joining us, and look for the follow-up email with the handouts and survey link. And thank you again for joining us. Have a great day.
Have a great day, everybody.